여러분 반갑습니다. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium hosted by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport and organized by Korea Agency for Infrastructure Technology Advancement. I am your MC, Moon So-ri. The 5th World Smart City Expo engaged in its opening ceremony in the morning session, and it will take place for 3 days from the 8th to 10th of September. Including today's symposium, we have a total of 3 general sessions, 2 academic seminars, and 1 special session. We have many programs for all of our participants, so I ask for your interest. Today's general session would be the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium, and the topic or the theme of the symposium is urban transformation through smart cities. If we look at some of the keywords, we have compact city, self-sufficient community, equality of access, and carbon zero. If we look at major cities around the world, it seems like they are placing everyday services in the neighborhood, and they have plans to pursue compact urban transformation. For instance, we have the 15-minute city of Paris, superblock of Barcelona, and the 20-minute neighborhood of Melbourne. In the case of Korea, we also have Busan Metropolitan City, and it has announced its vision to become a 15-minute city. As you can see, the smart city can play a pivotal role in reducing the distance for the citizens in their everyday services and to increase the scale of delivery of such services. The Smart City Top Agenda Symposium will look into ways of how we can realize eco-friendly and sustainable urban transformation. Due to the COVID-19 situation, we cannot meet face-to-face, unfortunately. However, we do have this online platform. It may be unfortunate, but still, I would like to ask you to also pose your questions as well as your comments on the chat box. And we will be selecting a couple of the questions to offer you with a small token of appreciation, so I ask for your participation. So then let us now begin the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium. First, we would like to invite First Vice Minister Yoon Sung-won of Land, Infrastructure and Transport for his opening remarks. Let us all watch his video.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Yoon Sung-won, First Vice Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. I am very pleased that the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium is being held under the theme of urban transformation through smart cities. First of all, I would like to thank Deputy Lord Mayor Nicholas Reese of Melbourne, Australia, and Director Michael Donaldson of Digital Innovation at the Barcelona City Council for participating as today's keynote speakers. In addition, I would like to thank the experts from home and abroad joining us today to introduce new case studies of establishing city models and review the roles and functions of smart cities in the process of urban transformation. COVID-19, which has swept through the world, has changed everything in the lives of humanity. Cities where most people live cannot be free from this enormous flow of change. Cities came to a standstill, and some have even said that the era of cities are over. But citizens still remain in the cities and are changing their ways of life and adapting. As the COVID-19 situation continues, we are now taking interest in improving the structure and function of cities in a sustainable and environment-friendly manner, and are reflecting such a direction into policies. The Paris 15-minute city, Barcelona superblock, and Melbourne's 20-minute neighborhood, which will be introduced today, are the most exemplary cases. These cities are close to home, work, and living infrastructure. These are sound and healthy cities close to nature, which provide a convenient living environment. As such, cities where various services necessary for our daily living are easily accessible in a close proximity are what we regard good livable cities. However, every city is different, and services are also different in nature. As such, not all living services can be located in close proximity. If it is not possible to narrow the distance for access of citizens, there is a way to expand the geographical range and distance of living service supply. Smart cities can play a big role in this area as well. Delivery and logistics services using drones, sharing platforms for vehicles and personal means of transportation, and mobility on demand are some of the means to support the provision of personalized living services in areas with insufficient infrastructure. During the symposium, many experts in the field of urban structure and smart cities from home and abroad are joining us today through this event. I look forward to drawing together a new future blueprint for cities where people can truly enjoy their lives. Thank you very much.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much.
또 나.
Yes, we just heard a big round of applause. Thank you very much. He touched upon the background for starting the policies for transforming our cities into a compact city structure. And he also talked about the roles of smart cities. Once again, thank you very much. First, Vice Minister Yoon Sung-won of Molit.
그래서 오늘
Next, we would now like to invite Kim Jong-un, Acting President of the Korea Agency for Infrastructure Technology Advancement, for his congratulatory remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
네, 반갑습니다.
Good day, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kim Jong-hak, Acting President of the Korea Agency for Infrastructure Technology Advancement. First of all, let me extend my sincere congratulations on the hosting of the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium, and I would like to express my gratitude to First Vice Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport Yoon Sung-won for organizing this event. Also, I would like to deliver my thanks to the scholars from home and abroad who will be giving their presentations and engaging in discussions on the topic of urban transformation through smart cities. And of course, I would like to thank everyone joining us online. The theme for this city is the city. The theme for this event is the urban city, and the city includes both the physical form and all the life that it contains. This is why human civilization and culture go through birth and demise in cities. But of course, a number of problems also arise in cities. However, mankind has been constantly solving urban problems through technological development and the likes. The COVID pandemic has stopped the city, but humanity is using cutting-edge technology to solve the problems at hand. Through the epidemiological investigation support system utilizing smart city technology, we trace the roots of confirmed cases to prevent further spread, and we are communicating the information online through information and communication technology. Another problem facing mankind today is climate change. Experts point to carbon emissions as the cause of climate change. According to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport Government Work Report for 2021, the building and transportation sector accounts for 38% of domestic carbon emissions. In order to solve this problem, we need a strategy to convert internal combustion engine vehicles to eco-friendly vehicles and replace the automobile-centered transportation system with pedestrians and eco-friendly means of transportation. In the mid to long term, urban structures should be compressed to optimize the movement routes of citizens and energy management efficiency. However, the situation in every city is different. It is difficult for one solution to apply to all cities. Therefore, smart cities that provide local customized services using cutting-edge technologies such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and big data should play a key role. We at Kaya are actively supporting the development and demonstration of technologies to enhance the perfection of smart cities and commercialize creative technologies of companies. The future life we want to achieve through smart cities will not be like flying in the sky and robots taking care of everything. Rather, it is a safe place with clean air, comfortable environment to walk around, easy to meet neighbors, and a livable city for everyone at the end of the day. So, I am looking forward to today's presentations and discussions. Lastly, I would like to once again thank the officials of the organizing organizations for their preparation. Thank you very much.
고맙습니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim Jong-hak. Acting President of Kaya has welcomed all of our participants. And I do know that you put in a lot of efforts, not only for today's symposium, but also for the expo. Once again, thank you very much, Acting President Kim Jong-hak, for all of your efforts. The 5th World Smart City Expo, Smart City Top Agenda Symposium will now begin its keynote presentations. First, we have from Melbourne, Australia, the case of Melbourne, especially on the innovation and the strategy, will be shared by Nicholas Reese, Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne City Council, Australia.
I'm Nicholas Reese, Deputy Lord Mayor of the City of Melbourne. I'm pleased to be part of a global discussion among people who are passionate about innovation and a smarter future. I'm delighted we have this expertise and skill in our city and in other cities that share our challenges and opportunities. Melbourne prides itself on being a dynamic city, constantly seeking innovative ways to meet the changing needs of the community, the economy, and the environment. We have all been heavily impacted by COVID-19, but let's hope our continuing conversations point us towards a better future. The pandemic has in some ways created a two-way street. It accelerates some parts of our city's progress, but it also brings others to a complete halt. But we have seen that innovation and technology does not stop, even when the economy contracts. Our city was already being digitally disrupted by Industry 4.0, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, AI, AR, VR, but the pandemic increased the pace of digitisation in many ways. We recognise this as an opportunity, despite the difficulties elsewhere caused by the pandemic. An opportunity to reimagine Melbourne's economy and new types of jobs and businesses, to reconsider the way things are done, and to reimagine and innovate for a sustainable and resilient future. We also value global exchanges of knowledge, such as this expo. City of Melbourne is a formal member of the G20 World Economic Forum Smart Cities Alliance and is currently participating in a model open data pilot. Right here in Melbourne, the pandemic turned the community and our council's own operations digital almost overnight. 2,000 of our staff quickly transitioned to working remotely. We held events and e-citizenship ceremonies over Zoom. The use of our e-libraries increased and we sought to digitise more council services. We even held an election during lockdown. And while I was pleased to be elected Deputy Lord Mayor, I must admit that it was quite a testing experience. Zoom town halls are still not as good as the real thing. After the election, we ramped up production of our data and insights tools to encourage innovation and to inform us which sectors of our community and economy needed our support. Earlier this month, we used our pedestrian data gathered from sensors to understand how major events like festivals impact on pedestrian activity. We also identified how many shops were vacant using an app we developed so we can activate them through our support programs. Melbourne's recovery from the pandemic depends heavily on great ideas and energy deployed swiftly. Technology provides many opportunities and ways for us to get there, but we don't have all the answers or all the ideas at the City of Melbourne. In 2021, we count on clever and curious minds more than ever, which is why we call on innovators, entrepreneurs, students and the wider community to help us identify solutions. We're proud of the real social democracy embodied by our Melbourne City DNA Digital Hub. This uses data visualisations and a 3D model of our whole city to enable community members to take part in the life and decisions that make up our city. Seeing our city's empty streets during lockdowns has been distressing, and recovery is constantly on our minds. Our open innovation competition this year focused on city reactivation and recovery post-COVID-19. We asked competition entrants to rethink the way we use and activate spaces and places, to bring people back to the city when it's safe through creative, innovative and technology-enabled solutions. We want to see our open data used to develop tailored solutions to bring the buzz back to our city. We want the ideas to be scalable. The impacts and challenges created by the pandemic are not unique, so nor should the solutions be. Recent competition finalists came with smart solutions for our hospitality and tourism brands. Ordelina is a single digital platform connecting hotels, restaurants and co-working businesses to generate hyper-local economic activity through our precincts. Wadu gamifies our city through augmented reality, smart route recommendations and real-time event data. Wadu is an innovative, fun and exciting app that promotes our local city. What a great new idea for Melbourne. We believe it has never been more important to test data and technology approaches to the city challenges. Melbourne is always pushing further in this, and we have a strong culture of collaboration. We continue to do this through our emerging technology testbed, which connects our immediate response to the crisis with our city's longer-term aspirations and regeneration. It is Australia's first local government-led 5G and Internet of Things testbed, involving 26 industry partners. Last year, despite all the lockdowns thrown at us, we set up a number of pilot projects that are now live. Among them are our city tram fitted with a microclimate sensor to understand how temperature and humidity impact the comfort of passengers and tram employees. Local government is well positioned to take the lead on new ways to use technology, knowledge and a smart city approach to create places where people love to live, work and visit. But we need to ask ourselves, what else can we do? What else might be possible? I know these questions will be discussed among all of those who are gathered for this expo. And I wish you every success in, as Melbourne has, developing a strong culture of innovation, knowledge sharing and collaboration. So while I so wish I was there with you in person, I can only do everything I can from here in Melbourne and wish you the most successful expo. Thank you very much.
네, 고맙습니다.
Yes, thank you very much. So here at the venue, we have just heard from Lord Deputy Mayor Nicholas Reese of Melbourne, of Australia. Thank you very much. He talked about the digital strategy and the strategy for innovation, and he talked about how digital technology can be applied to advancing smart cities, but these smart cities have to be human-centered, and many endeavors were introduced. So once again, thank you very much, Mr. Nicholas Reese.
We will now like to move on to the case of Barcelona. Barcelona's smart city and smart citizen is the topic of the next keynote speech. We have Michael Donaldson, Director of Digital Innovation of Barcelona City Council, to give us a keynote presentation.
Hello, everyone. Michael Donaldson here from Barcelona. Thanks a lot to the World Smart City Expo Congress to invite Barcelona, to invite me, this great event that's going on in Korea these days. As I said, it's a great pleasure to share with you all, although it's virtual because of these strange times that we are living. I cannot be there with you. But even though the good things about technologies and the digitalization that we are living and that we all are experiencing give us the opportunity to be together through this video message. And so distance are a little bit closer than in reality from Barcelona and Korea. As I said, it's a great pleasure to share with you all these few moments where I'm going to focus myself on which is our idea, Barcelona's model on smart cities. And basically, I'm going to focus myself on Decidim, which is our digital platform, our platform, online platform where we can do all kind of transparency and participation with our citizens. But before coming into details on this digital platform, Decidim, which means we decide, let me talk to you about our idea on smart cities, and you will see the relationship between this model of smart cities and the instrument and the platform Decidim. You will see that there is a link between technology and democracy, that there is a link between digitalization and participation of our citizens. So if we talk about smart cities, and if we talk about smart cities in Barcelona, it all started kind of 10 years, 12 years ago. That means 2010. We have our own Smart City World Congress, as you all know, and in fact, our Smart City Congress started in 2010, and that's more or less when we in Barcelona we started to develop and to implement all the model and all the ideas and all the instruments on smart cities. First, we started as many other cities about an idea was about the classical idea of smart cities, which is basically consists in gathering all this data, gathering all this the information that the sensors give us from the city activity in order to, first of all, have good notice on what's going on the city. If it's on real time, much better. And afterwards, not only knowing what's going on in the city, but also taking decisions based on what's going on in the city. You all know the way we gather the information through the sensors, through the traffic lights, through all the information that's going on in terms of pollution, in terms of maintenance of the green parks, in terms of transport, in terms of mobility, in terms of acoustic. There's a lot of sensors all through the city that give us a lot of information that we can cross-cut all this information. So we've got a good notice on what's going on in the city. And based on that information, we of course, with different systems, different information systems, we gather all together, and that information becomes knowledge, and with that knowledge we can take better decisions. So that would be more or less the kind of classical idea. We could talk about classical in terms of 10 years. That would be the classical idea on smart cities. But we have evolved on this idea. We kind of added new legs on this idea of smart cities. And this is where we talk about not only smart cities, but also about smart citizens. Because now it's not only about gathering the information that the skin of the city gives us, but it's also about trying to get, and let me be a little bit poetic, it's also about trying to get what the soul of the city can give us. And when we're talking about the soul of the city, we are talking about the knowledge, the information, the experience, the opinions, the proposals of our citizens. Because maybe our citizens cannot have all the information that all the sensors give us on real time. That's impossible. And we, of course, need the technology in order to gather all that precious information. But as long as the citizens cannot give us that information, they can give us the knowledge that they've got because they live in the city, they walk in the city, they go from one place to the other one, they work in the city. They've got their hopes, they've got their fears, they've got their ideas because they are experienced as citizens. And it's very important to gather all that intelligence, all that collective intelligence in order to take decisions, in order to take better decisions. So in the same way as we collect all the data that the city gives us, we need to gather all the data, all the information that our citizens are willing to give us. So in that sense, when we talk about smart city and smart citizens, if we add the two concepts, it gives us an idea of what we're working now in the city of Barcelona, which is no more than this idea of humanizing technology. We need to know, and it's not something that it has only happened in the last year because of the COVID and the lockdown and this hyper digitalization that we are all living, that we are all experiencing. It's not only in the last year. We need to know that in the last 20 years, we have been experimenting as many of digital and technological disruptions as in all the history of our humankind. So we've got only in these 20 last minutes, as I said, a lot of new technologies, a lot of new digital disruption, and in these last 20 years there are as many, and in the whole history of mankind. That means that there's a lot of things going on that we cannot even try to understand, because there are so many that there's no expert on our world that can conceive all this impact of the technologies that we are having in our cities and in our personal lives. So what we have to do is try to understand that these technologies need to be put at the service of people's need. That's not technology for technology. That's not technology for telecommunication or technology for infrastructure, although it's very important, the deployment of our 4G, 5G, the high-speed ITs, and the AI and big data and IoT and all these emerging technologies. It's not only important to have all these technologies, but what it's really important is to put humans, is to put citizens at the center of these technological and digital disruptions. And this is what we call humanizing technology, which, as I said before, is basically putting the technologies at the service of people's need, at the service of different problems, of different goals, of different challenges that we've got as cities. I mean, the evolution of our cities is being really fast in these last few years. And we've got new problems to face, we've got new challenges to face, such as inequality, such as the climate change, such as mobility, such as digital exclusion. Digital exclusion is something that we've discovered that's a real problem in these last months of COVID times, of these last months of pandemia, and especially with the lockdown. So as I said, there are new challenges we need to face, and we need new ideas. We need to introduce innovation in order to achieve, as I said, new solutions to these new problems. Because as I said before, 20 years ago and the reality now has nothing to do. So we're working basically on this idea of humanizing technology. And this is again where this idea, sorry for repeating myself, my English is not that extensive as I wish it was. This is again where this idea of bringing in the voice, the voice of our citizens comes into force and has a real sense. We are talking about, as I said before, we are talking about the idea of introducing the experience and the knowledge and the ideas of our citizens, because nowadays the challenges that we face as global cities, it's something that we can not only try to deliver and try to respond and try to give an answer only from the public institutions. In the case of Barcelona, from the city hall of Barcelona, it's something that it needs to bring along with our public institution. It needs to bring a lot of new ideas, a lot of innovation. And how are we going to create innovation? Well, first of all, by trying to have new questions. If the reality has changed, we need to answer, and we need to make us new questions. But we're also going to gain a lot of innovation if we bring along a lot of other ideas that are outside of the building of the city hall, and that means bringing ideas from the university, from the enterprises, from the economic sector, from the civil society, from the research centers, from a lot of stakeholders, but also and especially as well from our citizens, because as I said, we need to put citizens in the center of our action. In that sense, and now I'm trying to go into focus and trying to go to the end of this exposition, we have launched now 4 years ago a digital platform. It's called Decidim, where we can gather all this information, all these proposals, all these ideas that the citizens can give us. In that way, we are creating a virtual digital agora of participation. Of course, we still have all our process and all our gatherings of participation with the citizens, but we also wanted to open a new window, a digital window, to the citizens to give us their feedbacks on the projects, but not also giving us their feedbacks on our projects, but also by bringing the new ideas. We're talking about a platform that's made or it's based on open source. So that means that everybody, every institution can use this platform. In fact, there are more than 100 institutions all over Europe, America, and different cities that they are using this platform based on this open source code. And we would be delighted to gather and to add more institutions into our community, because the more institutions that come in our platform, the more rich that it will be, more options, more functionalities will have this open source and this open source platform. And as I said before, it's not only about transparency in this platform, it's not only about having the feedback on the different projects that we consider to our citizens, but it's also about getting new ideas and even to decide these proposals along with our citizens. In that sense, we have experienced in the last past months what we call a participatory budget process, which basically consisted in the investment of 30 million euros in the different neighborhoods of Barcelona. These investments, these 30 million investments, were created based on the ideas, on the proposals of our citizens. So basically, in this process, we had a first part, which it consists in gathering all these ideas, all these proposals based on the citizens, and afterwards, once we decided based on technical criteria, which of these proposals could be reality with investments, we passed to a second phase of this process, which is basically consists in the votes in an election in the votes of the proposals that were made previously by our citizens. We are talking that after a process that gathered more than 65,000 people, we were able to vote 76 projects that consist in these 30 million euros investments that I said before, and this is something that we are going to do in the next year. So thanks to this digital platform, to Decidim, we were able not only to listen to our citizens' ideas, but also to vote and to decide through the elections on this participatory budget process, as I said before, through Decidim. I hope you find interest this experience in Barcelona, and I'll be more than delighted to be in touch with any of you who would like to go on further forms of collaboration. Thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the World Smart City Expo in Korea, in Asia. Bye bye.
네, 고맙습니다.
Yes, thank you very much. We just heard from the Director of Digital Innovation, Michael Donaldson from the Barcelona City Council, and his presentation was on the smart city and smart citizen. In creating a smart city, we can see that the citizens of Barcelona was quite important. He mentioned about the humanizing technology or the smart city that played a great role in Barcelona. Thank you very much, Director Donaldson, for your inspiring speech.
네,
And we will soon begin the panel discussion, but before that, we'll listen to the presentations by panelists. And two presenters are joining us live despite the time gap. Let's first hear the first presentation by Professor Carlos Moreno of the Sorbonne University in Paris. He will be speaking on the Paris 15-minute city.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Paris. It's a great honor for me to share with you my vision, experience, and practices about the 15-minute city. This concept has been becoming a very popular worldwide. The first city, the pioneer city, of course, was Paris. I want to give a tribute to the mayor, Miss Anne Hidalgo. She has embraced this concept in 2019 in order to propose to Parisians and other new projects for the next years in order to propose a new urban lifestyle. The 15-minute city is a response for reducing radically our CO2 emissions, and we need absolutely to do it if we wanted to reach the carbon neutrality at the horizon 2050. The cities are the most contributor to CO2 emissions, and in cities, the transportation is the main contributor. We need to change, in particular, our mobilities for avoiding the long commute in cities. Since the beginning of 2020, our planet, our cities are confronted to this tragic COVID-19 pandemic crisis. We need to propose to cities and dwellers another urban lifestyles for living during this pandemic crisis. In fact, with the climate change and the COVID-19, we should build a new urban and territorial narrative for developing the social fabric, for developing this sustainable city and territories. The sustainable city is in reality the convergence between economical, ecological, and social positive impact. For having a sustainable city, we need at the same time to take care of the general interest. We need to have a city for all. The common good is at the heart of the 50-minute city with the urban common. This is the scientific contribution of the Nobel Prize Egon Rollström for proposing an urban policy in order to redeploy the material or immaterial resources, private or public, in order to satisfy the general interest. Today, with the urban common, with the proximities, this is a new trajectory, a new path for breaking with the hectic city, mineral, big shops, poor conditions for transporting. The 50-minute city, this is the way for propose to shift toward a new urban mindset. We needed to improve the quality of life. We needed to take our time for living differently, for propose in the proximities another rhythm for living, for working. The city of proximities is based on 4 pillars. Ecology, for reducing our CO2 emissions. Proximity, for using more and better our infrastructures, our building. Solidarity, for creating a strong social link, for reconquer the public space, for taking care of fragile people, elderly people, and kids. And the last and not least, the citizen empowerment, for fostering the citizen dwellers to be involved in the local projects. The 15-minute city, this is the possibility for transforming our proximities, for having a health city. We needed to develop this new rhythm in the cities for reducing our daily mobility and reducing our CO2 emissions. This is the chrono-urbanism. At the same time, we need to use more and better our infrastructures with the chronotopia, the multi-purpose functions. And we need to change our urban culture with the topophilia for loving our places. The 15-minute city, this is a journey, this is a trajectory, this is a path for developing this new social circularity. This is a new human-oriented urbanism. We need to mix the 6 essential urban functions: to live, to work, to supply, to care, to learn, to enjoy. Within a short perimeter, 15-minute city, on foot or by bike, with very, very low CO2 emission, we have the possibility to provide these multi-service cities. In the zone of high density, 15 minutes, in the territory with middle or low density, 30 minutes bath. This social circularity open the way for increasing the quality of life with three new indicators. My personal well-being, myself, with my family, my sociability, the relationship, myself with my neighbor and my colleague works, and my ecological positive attitude with the planet and the other people, the otherness. We needed to implement this social circularity to offer the multi-services urban policy for having an intensive social link, for reinstalling the local employment, for developing more and more activities based on friendly districts. Take our time with the better conditions. The 50-minute city is in reality a great challenge for breaking with the monofunctional and vertical activities. We need to deploy a lot of intersections. We need to mix uses for having a happy city, to offer a happy life, for finding happy citizens. With my team, we are proposing this matrix of the high quality societal life with the new indicators for managing how could we increase our quality of life with a polycentric and multi-purpose vicinity. This is essential for understanding it. We need to propose the multi-services in the proximity, but at the same time, this is the holistic way for implementing this polycentric way in the whole city. This is not only my 50-minute city for myself and my neighbor. This is the way for having a vibrant city with the 15-minute city in the different location of my city. For going from the constrained mobility towards a chosen mobility. We needed to change our work style to develop, instead of the corporate towards this new paradigm of the decentralized work, the near working. We have today a very powerful opportunity with the digital technologies for exploring my proximity, for finding the material or immaterial resources, for making the territorial diagnosis, for formulating new strategies for transforming my city. In the case of the city of Paris, for finish, this is today the new urban policy, transforming public spaces to develop happy proximity, to develop the bike lanes, to reduce the individual diesel cars, to reconquer the public spaces instead of the road about, to do the squares for human and not for cars, including the mythical Champs-Élysées, to transform the spaces, for example, the schools, turning the schoolyards for opening to neighbor, for having the other activities, the school street for having peaceful streets only for pedestrians around the schools, for opening for the new activities, to foster the urban agriculture, the multi-purpose functions for developing the urban agriculture activities in different locations, for supporting local shops, to consider that the local commerce as a common good, to promoting the local economy, to develop a social link, to implement the local shops in different districts with the companies of the city. Of course, we have the participatory budget, 800 million euros, totally dedicated for fostering the local projects in the districts. The 15-minute city, this is the international urban policy today, in particular with the C40 cities. Seoul is one of the members of this powerful network of global cities. The international 15-minute action is a very big opportunity for showing the concrete actions in order to transform our cities in this happy proximity. Thank you for your attention.
네, 고맙습니다.
Yes, thank you very much. That was an insightful presentation, and the participants were able to listen to the presentation, and some were sending a big round of applause. So the person who came up with the 15-minute city, the concept itself, gave a presentation on the concept and the relevant policies and how the policy is being implemented. And I think that there will be heightened expectations for how the 15-minute city can be applied to make our lives more rich and prosperous. Let us go on to the next presentation.
로즈 한센 교수님 해주시겠는데.
And the presentation will be given by Professor Rose Hansen from Melbourne University. She will be talking about the 20-minute neighborhood. She participated in the establishment of this model and also planned Melbourne. She is a member of the Urban Planning Committee, and she will now give a presentation on the Melbourne 20-minute neighborhood. We have her online, actually. Thank you very much for joining us despite the different time zone.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for joining us today despite the time difference.
Yes, well, it's not too bad.
It's good. So, shall we start?
Yes, that's fine. Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about my city, Melbourne, Australia. In 2013, I was asked by the Victorian State Government to chair the Ministerial Advisory Committee on the preparation of a new metropolitan strategy, Plan Melbourne 2017-2050. A key concept underpinning Plan Melbourne is creating a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. Today, I will talk about this concept in the context of Melbourne. Next slide, please. Melbourne is the second largest city in Australia with 5 million residents. Sydney is the largest with 5.3 million residents. Updated population projections for Melbourne estimate the city to grow to just over 9 million by 2050. Melbourne is located on the southern coastline of Australia. The metropolitan area of Melbourne extends for more than 100 kilometres from east to west. The city covers almost 1,000 square kilometres and is the 8th largest city in the world in terms of geographic size. Today, Melbourne is a very low density city. The city's average density in 2020 was 516 people per square kilometre. Paris is 20,000 people per square kilometre, whilst London is 5,700 people per square kilometre. This low density pattern of urban development increases the distances travelled to access jobs and services, as well as increasing the cost of providing basic urban infrastructure, such as public transport and community facilities. The achievement of a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods is a big challenge for Melbourne. Next, please. The vision for Melbourne is to continue to be a global city of opportunity and choice. Opportunity is influenced by such factors as being able to easily access a diverse range of jobs and services within a reasonable travel time. Choice is related to factors such as the type of housing available at a price you can afford to buy or rent in a location close to where you work, and the availability of different services and facilities that meet your needs. The opportunities we have and the choices we make impact on our quality of life, health and well-being. Unfortunately, Melbourne has become a city of spatial inequality. Those able to afford housing in central and inner urban Melbourne enjoy excellent access to good public transport systems, a wide range of job opportunities, and places that offer good quality urban amenity. Some middle suburbs are also well endowed with jobs and services, whereas others are not. With rapid population growth in the outer urban areas at densities that are still relatively low, on average 20 dwellings per hectare, the cost of providing basic urban infrastructure is relatively high. There are significant lags in the delivery of childcare, preschool and primary schools, of health and medical centres, recreation facilities, parks and local places to shop and socialise. These greenfield estates look great in the marketing brochures, promising an array of services and facilities. However, the harsh reality is that in these urban growth areas and in several established middle and outer suburbs, there is poor accessibility to jobs and services, limited public participation, traffic congestion, social isolation, limited investment and declining public health. Plan Melbourne aims to address these and other issues facing existing and future inhabitants of metropolitan Melbourne. Next, please. Plan Melbourne aims, amongst other goals, to create a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. The plan acknowledges that the neighbourhood is the basic community building block to creating strong, resilient, inclusive and sustainable communities. 5 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals have been applied to Melbourne's 20-minute neighbourhood. Within this framework, 4 key policy areas are embedded in the 20-minute neighbourhood. They are jobs, housing, transport, community and livability. In essence, the 20-minute neighbourhood is all about living locally. In Plan Melbourne, it's about creating accessible, safe and attractive local areas where people can access most of their everyday needs within a 20-minute walk, cycle or public transport trip, making Melbourne a healthier and more inclusive place to live, work and visit. The next video, there's a short video to follow prepared by the Victorian State Government, which actually explains the 20-minute neighbourhood. So I'll let the video play. Thank you.
To improve livability, the Victorian Government is working to create a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's all about creating walkable neighbourhoods where people can live locally. Places where communities can access most of their daily needs within a 20-minute return walk from home. These places should have diverse housing options and access to safe cycling routes and local public transport, local health facilities, parks, shops and other local infrastructure. We are already working with local government, communities and industry to deliver projects and are committed to building a livable city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. To find out more, visit the Plan Melbourne website.
Next slide, please. There are 6 hallmarks of Melbourne's 20-minute neighbourhoods. Each neighbourhood must firstly be safe, accessible and well connected to pedestrian and cyclist paths. Secondly, offer a high quality public realm and open spaces which promote social interaction and integrate nature into the urban environment. Third is to provide a range of services and facilities that support local living. 4 is facilitate easy, safe and convenient access to public transport that connects people to jobs and higher order services. 5th is deliver housing and population densities that make local services viable. And finally, 6th is facilitate thriving local economies, including opportunities for local business startups. Underpinning the concept of 20-minute neighbourhoods is for Melbourne to become a compact, connected and livable city with a strong focus on people and placemaking. This will require a greater emphasis on the 3 Ds, density, diversity and design, in both how we transform existing neighbourhoods and plan new neighbourhoods to become 20-minute neighbourhoods. Next slide, please. You may ask, why does Melbourne need to become a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods? There are important environmental benefits. Compact urban development can reduce drive times by 40% and reduce CO2 emissions by 10%. Mixed use and higher density development reduce pollution and fuel consumption. The social benefits include creating opportunities for social interaction and social cohesion. The 20-minute neighbourhood supports social equity and improved passive surveillance. The economic benefits are also evident, such as increasing transport capacity whilst reducing household transport costs by up to 50%. Pedestrian and cycling infrastructure lowers healthcare costs, with walking increasing incidental trading by up to 40%. As importantly, there are also significant health and wellbeing benefits, including reduced costs of obesity, inactivity and chronic disease, increased walking rates and higher active transport use by all age groups. Next slide, please. The Victorian Government has undertaken 3 20-minute neighbourhood pilot projects in established middle suburbs to test if this concept can work and what needs to be done to create a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. Each pilot area has its own specific attributes and issues. Step 1 of these pilot projects was to develop community partnerships. Surveys, community workshops, walking tours, community days, street parties, shop local campaigns, community movie nights, youth engagement workshops, profiles of local residents and traders were all part of building partnerships. Crowdspotting provided a valuable spatial data tool for people to identify issues within their local neighbourhood, their favourite places and ideas for a better neighbourhood. Next slide, please. Step 2 undertook technical assessments such as walking assessments, movement and place assessments, and housing development and heat vulnerability mapping. A scorecard for each pilot neighbourhood was applied, ranking the following: movement networks, public open space, community facilities, destinations, sense of place, housing diversity, buildings, and healthy food. The final step involved whole of government workshops to identify strategies to improve planning policy, service delivery, and community engagement. Next slide, please. The key findings from the 20-minute neighbourhood program were as follows. Place-based planning is an effective and integrated approach to neighbourhood planning that involves whole of government coordination. That developing partnerships with the community was fundamental to the success of these projects. All 3 neighbourhood communities wanted improvements to pedestrian amenity, more housing diversity and improvements to all active modes of transport. That there was a need for better designed medium density development in the neighbourhoods, and that creating a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods is a long-term commitment. A roadmap has been established based on policy, place and partnerships. Further work is being undertaken to implement place-based works within the 3 pilot neighbourhoods and to advance this concept. Next slide, please. A key question is how can we create 20-minute neighbourhoods in new greenfield urban growth areas? In 2019, 54% of new dwellings were approved in the established area of Melbourne, compared to 46% in the growth areas. Plan Melbourne sets an aspirational target where 70% of all net additional dwellings are to be located within established Melbourne and 30% in the growth areas. Next slide, please. Work has commenced on investigating how the 20-minute neighbourhood concept can be applied in these new urban growth areas located on the fringe of Melbourne's existing suburbs. Issues emerging in these new estates include the following: a lack of safe, accessible and well-connected pedestrian and cyclist networks. Public realm and open spaces lack adequate amenities, prioritise car access, lack tree canopy and are not designed for biodiversity and interconnectivity. There is a poor provision of community infrastructure and places to meet and socialise. The precinct planning approach is a cookie-cutter approach, lacking density and diversity, as well as good design outcomes. There is a lack of quality public transport connecting people to jobs and high-order services. High house-to-lot size ratios is reducing the amount of private outdoor garden and play space, and there is a very high level of car dependency that negates the affordability of these new urban suburbs. Next slide, please. Typical car-centric, low-density design and long timelines for provision of public transport in these newly developing neighbourhoods are factors inhibiting their walkability. Walkability is constrained by urban design patterns that create long, indirect routes to daily need destinations. Retail centres are designed for car access. Residential streetscapes lack visual interest and building frontages do not prioritise the pedestrian experience. Next slide, please. In 2020, the Victorian Government and Resilient Melbourne undertook 4 living locally research projects in newly developing urban growth estates. The focus was on developing scenarios to support walkability and strategies for the early delivery and staging of social infrastructure. Barriers to delivering 20-minute neighbourhoods in these urban growth areas were identified. They include a lack of whole-of-government approach to infrastructure delivery, weaknesses in the current planning and development policy and enforcement practices, a lack of integration of broader regional scaled infrastructure, especially transport, investment funding and budgetary constraints, and a need for changes in resident perceptions and behaviours. A total of 12 recommendations under the following 3 themes have been identified: place, partnerships, policy. Already relevant stakeholders are responding to these recommendations in the planning and development of their new greenfield estates. Next slide, please. So from the work completed to date, the key takeouts for Melbourne are summarised as follows. 1, creating a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods in Melbourne is a long-term commitment. 2, it requires a whole-of-government approach working collaboratively with the development sector, local communities and other stakeholders. 3, each neighbourhood is different. There is no set formula. 4, the focus is on people and place and being able to live locally. 5, you need the 3 Ds, density, diversity and design in each neighbourhood. 6, focus on walking, cycling and public transport. They are the key connectors and enablers to living locally. And finally, we need to apply the 20-minute neighbourhood concept to both existing suburbs and new emerging suburbs. The next slide, please. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. So our speaker talked about the 20-minute neighborhood of Melbourne, and it was a very detailed presentation talking about the policies and the ongoing projects. So we were able to hear from the case of Australia, and I think that there were many implications for other countries and cities as well. So we were supposed to hear from Sabi Matila from the Barcelona City Council, and we tried to have the speaker join us, but there were some technical difficulties, there were some network issues, and so we will try to connect the speaker in a while. So while we take a look at the technical issues, we will take a short break, and after that we will invite our next speaker. We will reconvene in 5 minutes, so please take a short break. And also, our online audience, please come back in 5 minutes to share the various information that will be provided. Thank you very much.
네, 여러분 편히 쉬셨습니까?
Did you all enjoy the break? You're joining us at the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium. We're currently sharing the cases from all around the world to understand what kind of policies and strategies of a smart city would be most substantial. We have speakers joining us online, and they've shared with us their presentations. And I do know that there are many participants awaiting the presentation from Barcelona, but unfortunately, due to network connection issues, Chief Architect Xavier Matilda wasn't able to join us, but we will try to find the opportunity to have the speaker speak, and we'll share that via video with our participants in the future.
Hello, everyone from Barcelona. I am Xavi Matilla, Chief Architect of the City of Barcelona, and on behalf of the City Council, thank you so much for your invitation. For us, it's a really pleasure to have the opportunity to share with all of you what are we actually working on in our city, what is to say, which are the urban challenges that we are facing on. So thank you so much. Let's start with the presentation. My brief lecture today will be basically about which are the principles that we think we need to start from to define a new urban paradigm in order to make our cities livable places, and of course healthier places for everyone. So, and after that, I would like to introduce you one of our, I think, well-known programs, Superblock Barcelona, that probably shows better which are these principles. We already know that climate change is a reality, even more after this summer, where we were able to see a lot of hard episodes all around the world with this issue. In Barcelona, the Climate Emergency Declaration was approved in January 2020, and this is a document that defines which are the changes of urban model that we need to tackle in order to improve our cities. In fact, what we are talking about is we need to recover the balance between cities and territory. That is to say, we need to recover the balance between cities and planet. And these paintings of these beautiful paintings of Ambrogio Lorenzetti in Palazzo Comunale di Siena that shows us which are the effects of the good government, also of the bad government. In this slide, we are seeing the effects of the good government. On the left, we can see what is happening in the city, in a balanced city with prosperity, with harmony, with beauty also. And on the right, what is happening in the territory, that it is also a very balanced territory with good landscape, productivity, agriculture productivity. So it shows that we need to work thinking that we won't be able to have better cities if we are not able to improve also our planet. So we have always to approach to the urban issues, always thinking that we need to understand which are the exchanges that are producing between city and between territory in different circumstances. Of course, we need to improve the idea of short distances in our cities and to make it easier, the different proximity activities in our neighborhoods. We could say that Barcelona is already a short distance city after the big efforts that were made during the 80s and 90s. And we can see in this slide, which is the distribution of different public facilities around the city. I think there above we can see the markets and in the different neighborhoods of the city, and below the libraries. So we could think that we have a very good distribution in all of our neighborhoods, but we need to stay always aware that we need always to keep this good balance and to make easy this idea of proximity with facilities well distributed around the city. And of course, a very important challenges in our cities where there are, we could say, yes, sharing the space, different scales. And of course, our cities like Barcelona, Seoul, Paris, among others, are global cities. So we need to manage what means this global condition in our cities. But what is more important, we need to understand that the global scale needs to be could articulated with the other scales that are also in our cities, like the metropolitan scale one that indicates that our city has shifted from a medium size to a bigger size, and there are different conditions that we need to manage and to define. And of course, the most important and probably the most fragile is the human scale, because the global scale usually has meant that very bad impacts in our human scale in our cities. We know the tourism impacts among others has been usually, yes, very important problems of gentrification or high raising prices of housing. So I think one would say that the second main challenge in this new urban paradigm should be how we are able to live all together these three scales in harmony with very good balance, in order that our cities are able to maintain this human scale, this proximity scale, but also giving answer and taking all the opportunities that give us this global and metropolitan scales. And obviously, we need to improve the environmental conditions of our cities. You already know, we need to naturalize our cities. We need to introduce the natural condition. What is to say, not only about green, but also how we are able to make more resilient our cities, how are we able to manage this metabolize that our cities needs about different needs like energy, food. So we need to understand that our cities are a live organism and need to generate these good conditions, not only for make it better for people, but also to be able to face the climate change that is already arriving in our cities. So we need to improve then the conditions in order to face the high temperatures episode that we have already having in Barcelona, also different hard rainy episodes. So naturalize means how are we doing our cities more resilient and also a more comfortable space with environmental for people. And of course, I said before that we are talking about how to recover the human scale in our cities. And of course, it means how are we able to make our cities a good place with calm, with less stress, with less noise, with less pollution, a place where we are able to recover our senses, our capacity of smell, of hear, listen, music, even like we are seeing in this slide. This is I really like this picture because it was last year in March, a Sunday morning, where we usually cut to the cars different main streets of Barcelona, and we are able to see this episode with a piano in the middle of the street, where usually there are a lot of cars crossing through and people listening just in the middle of the asphalt this music. I think it shows us really well what we need to change from a noisy and contaminated environmental to another one that is better and appropriated for people. And of course, if we need to recover the calm, if we want to recover the balance with our territory or planet, we want to have cities with more nature and more resilient. The first action we need to approach to tackle is how to change the mobility system in our cities. I would say the metropolitan mobility system in our cities. And here is when it comes Superblock Barcelona, with the idea that we need to reorganize the mobility in our cities, giving priority to public transport, giving priority to biking, giving priority to walking, in order to reduce the space that mobility needs in our cities and take it space to another social activities to increase urban greenery. So behind Superblock Barcelona, there is the main idea that we need to reorganize our mobility to make it more efficient, more healthier, and also to recover space for people. Superblock Barcelona had a first period between 2015 2020, where there were developed different small areas around the city. The truth is that the feedback and all the indicators of this first period, we can see right now a picture that shows us what kind of transformation we are talking about in Superblock Barcelona, how we are changing this gray asphalt, a lot of cars, spaces to another one that we are seeing in the picture below, with greenery, a new square with urban greenery, people biking, people walking, more space for people, for kids, for elderly, and so on. After this period, I was saying that all the indicators has been absolutely positive. So we are able to explain that Superblock Barcelona works and works very well, because we have been able to reduce the air pollution in the areas that Superblock Barcelona has been set up. We have been able to reduce the noise. We have been able, of course, to reduce the amount of cars that are crossing through these areas every day. So after this period, and with these really good results, we thought that it was a moment just to scale up the idea of Superblock, and that we need to understand the Superblock idea have the potential to become a global project for the whole city of Barcelona. And we launched this picture last year that shows us that if we are able to identify which are the public spaces that can be free up after this mobility reorganization of the city, we are able to identify this new environmental infrastructure for the entire city of Barcelona. This is we call it the green axis that define this new network, green network all around the city, just connecting neighborhoods, giving all the neighborhoods of the city new spaces for green, for social activities, for events, for public events. What is most important, that it is able to create a new system. And for us, it's very important. We are not talking about just two small transformations, like if we were making oases, different parts of the city. What we want is to define a systemical transformation for our city. And the idea of Superblock Barcelona allows us to define this, and this is the general framework from which we are working right now in the new projects. with, of course, a territory, a central territory of the city. With we are giving a certain priority. This is the Eixample. We could see in the picture before the Eixample Cerdà, well, designed in the middle of the 19th century, just to unfold the urban development after the medieval walls of Barcelona were demolished of the ancient city. And the reality is that this area, in the central area of the Eixample of Barcelona, is where we have the worst environmental conditions in the city. We can see this different data in the middle of the Eixample. There are every day crossing more cars. We are talking 350,000 cars every day crossing. That are more cars than the ones that are crossing the city through the roundabouts of the city. So we could say right now that the Eixample is like a cars lift, just connecting metropolitan movements, all basically with cars. And of course, it produces a really hard impacts in the Eixample, environmental impacts. On the right, we can see which are the highest level of air pollution in the city, and of course it's produced basically where are more cars every day crossing. We have identified the Eixample as a territory to prioritize this new development of suburban Barcelona, and we have defined which are the 21 streets that we are starting right now at transforming in a new green axis or around the Eixample. The idea is the same, but the whole city who define a new environmental structure, environmental system in order to generate a new balance where everyone have a new axis really near from his home, just trying to promote the idea of proximity that we said before. So we are talking about 21 green streets, but also 21 streets just in the crossing areas between these 21 axes. And this is very important because the Eixample is an urban fabric that was not designed with squares. It only has streets. So we have also the possibility to generate a new public space that there didn't exist before in this urban fabric. So this have a very important potential in order to increase the urban greenery with more than 6 hectares in these areas. And behind this new idea of this environmental structure and new green axis, there is a new idea of public space, basically a new idea of a street. How is the street that we think that the city needs for the next century and for the future? And we have defined 5 main principles that we think should define this new street for our cities. The first is that the street need to be environmental infrastructure. Our streets need to increase the idea that there are spaces to manage what is happening with our climate conditions, what is happening with water, and how can the streets help to improve our water cycle management? How can our streets help us to improve our temperature conditions with more shadows, with more green, with more trees? Of course, the second one is how can our streets help us to generate best conditions for everyone? So how can we introduce new criteria of design, of public design, in order to make it better and more comfortable for elderly people, for kids? How can we able to introduce a feminine perspective in the definition of our public space? Third one, very important, we need to innovate in the new urban design. We need to discover which are the new materials that will define our public space, basically because the materials that we have been using in our public space have been identified and also designed because there were cars. And all the urban furniture that we have in our cities is always thought to resist a car impact. So if we are able to take out the cars, we need to redefine which are the materials, which are the design that we are creating this new urban furniture, these new surfaces, these new materials with a human approach, not a cars approach. Of course, the fourth is about heritage and landscape. We already know we have a city with long historical tradition with heritage buildings, with a very beautiful and stretch of beautiful facades with trees. So we need to integrate all this heritage in the new project in order to make it a very important issue in the new definition. And of course, the first one is about accessibility. This transformation needs to allow that everyone is able to reach, of course, the home, but also we need to allow the urban goods distribution, of course, the urban services. So these are the 5 principles that for us define this new street. This is a scheme that explain which we think in this transformation from a junction, from a crossing area between two streets that is basically a space of asphalt and cars, to another one that allows us to increase even more the possibility of urban greenery and social spaces in these areas. We are talking about a space with 2,000 square meters surface. So we could say that is a kind of a neighborhood square in every of the different neighborhoods that we have in our Eixample. And this is the first step that we have started. Right now, we are redacting the projects of these first 4 green axes in the Eixample. The idea is how to extend the existing one in the Sant Antoni neighborhood. And we are trying always to connect green spaces that already exist in the Eixample. So this axis that it's Consell de Cent Street connecting Miró Park with Sant Joan Promenade, Passeig Sant Joan, and the other one just connecting big avenues. It will allow us to finish this work in 2023. And it will be the first step, and we are also just defining which will be the second, the third, and the fourth step, with the idea that to have completed the 21 green axes in the street by 2030. Yes, this is a picture. In fact, for the development of these 4 axes, we launched an international competition. The result with 8 teams that are working in the project. 4 teams are working the 4 axes. 4 teams are working the 4 squares. And this is the picture of the winner of the competition of the green axis. And it's very interesting because the motto of the proposal was working from the middle. Just trying to change this behavior that we have assumed during a lot of years, that we only can walk the streets, yes, near to the facade, and explaining us that we are able also working from the middle. So the idea is how can we redefine this street design in order to allow us to working from the middle, with 2 very important challenges. If we are talking about public space, I said before, the street is not is a 3-dimension space. It's very important. The street is not only the pavement. We need also to improve and to transform what is happening in the subsoil if we want to increase the environmental capacity and the environmental conditions of our streets. With the subsoil, of course, was also thought for cars to resist the weight of the cars and the big vehicles, and we need to transform it in order to improve the capacity of the subsoil, to manage the water cycle, in order to be a better subsoil for greenery. If we want to have better trees and better plants, we want, in fact, to naturalize in a good way our cities. And of course, these transformations, it aims also to boost the social activities, and we are also thinking how this new design is able to generate new and good relations with the ground floors of the building. The street, of course, doesn't end just the facades. We always have thought that the street starts in the ground floors of the building, with public activities, if there is a facility, a public facility, but also with the commercial and also with the residential activities. So this ground floor, we thought that needs to incorporate the idea of the street. And of course, the idea of the street need to be thought in order to generate these new relations between the indoor spaces and the outdoor spaces of our streets. Very important, we are monitoring all the transformation public space processes, and we have defined right now a new protocol in order to increase the capacity of the city to generate knowledge about what is happening in our public space, not only in a physical realm, like to know which are the basic transformation about the surfaces, new elements, and new trees, and so on. But also we want to know what is happening to people with this kind of transformation, how is affecting, how is impacting to the health of people, to education of our kids, and of course, what is happening also in the different human activities in these neighborhoods, what is happening with the economical impacts in these areas, what is happening in the housing market, so what is happening with the idea of diversity of different activities. So we have really briefly a new indicator protocol to monitorize and to know what is happening with this kind of transformations. And finally, Super Bowl Barcelona for us is a city project. It's not a project of the city council. It's not a project of a neighborhood. For us, it's a city project. So we, from the very beginning of the program, there were defined a very, I would say, very intense participatory program from the very beginning. We are aware that everyone be able to participate in the different spaces. Like this picture show us a tactile model of a green axis to make possible the handicapped people, in this case blind people, to understand what we are doing. And of course, we have this participatory process has been defined from the very beginning. I would say that the main idea is that before start every project of Super Bowl Barcelona, there is defined, we could say, a promotional group. And a promotional group integrate all people interested in the project, different stakeholders interested in the project, but it's just created from the very beginning in order to generate the good conditions to be absolutely transparent with the idea of the project. And of course, to make people be able to participate in the decisions from the very beginning. And of course, we are also introducing new digital tools. This is the CDIM. You probably already know it's an open source participatory platform, digital platform. It allows us, the city council, just to open all the different processes and policies that we are taking in the city. It allows us to generate forums area, to upload all the documents linked with every project. It allows us also to generate processes of public budget, the definition of public budgets. So for us, it's very important just to improve the conditions and the new tools that allows make it easier to everyone to participate in the different public space transformations in our cities. And this was the last picture. Well, I hope it was of your interest. And one more time, thank you so much for invitation from Barcelona. Thank you.
So then, let us now invite our panelists to engage in a panel discussion. I would like to briefly introduce you to our panelists that are here with us offline. We first have Professor Park So-yeon of Seoul National University. Please welcome her with a big round of applause. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Please join us on the stage. And we have Director of LGCNS, Mr. Yu In-sang. Welcome. Thank you very much. We hope you would share your insights as a member of the private sector. And as our moderator for the panel discussion, we have Professor Lee Sang-hoon of Korea University. Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being the moderator of this session. And we have Professor Carlos Moreno of Sorbonne University of Paris and Professor Ross Hansen of University of Melbourne, connecting via Zoom to engage in the panel discussion. And if you do have any questions during the panel discussion, please use the chat box. And you may also raise any questions as well as comments, and we will have the questions answered. And we'll also provide you with a token of appreciation for your participation. And let us now begin the panel discussion. And now, the moderator, you have the floor.
안녕하세요.
Yes, good afternoon. As was introduced, I am Lee Sang-won, professor at Korea University. Now, it is an honor for me to serve as a moderator at this panel discussion with experts from home and abroad. So, Sophie Matila was supposed to join us, but unfortunately, we were not able to connect our speaker. But luckily, this means that we have more time to carry out our panel discussion, and maybe we can use that for our benefit. So we have with us here on stage 2 panelists, and also there are those joining us through the online channel. But we might be able to connect Chief Architect Sophie Matila later on. So now, the theme of the panel discussion is the role of smart cities in innovating the urban structure and ways for applying smart cities in Korea. And this is actually closely linked with what is being pursued by MOLIT in innovating urban structures. So MOLIT, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport of Korea, has been pursuing the low carbonization of cities, and for that it has been working on building compact cities and transforming the structure to polycenter structures. So actually, this is a topic that I really wanted to discuss about. As you know, in Korea, there is the Smart City Act, and this act deals with the materialistic aspects of the city, the spaces, and also the technology that is applied in constructing the cities. But actually, if you look at how the smart cities are being built, we can see that everything is actually quite IT-centric. So let's think about the smart city value chain. What comes to your mind? The device provider, the network service provider, the platform provider, and mobility, energy, building, and living services suppliers. What does this mean? Well, actually, Korea Smart City Act does not really take into consideration all of the elements that go into building smart cities. And until the end of last year, I was the head of the Smart City Support Group. And what was discussed at that time through this group was that we need to actually consider all the elements composing the smart cities, and we need to reconsider the value chain of smart cities. So we need to have not only the IT service providers, but also we need the, for example, financial institutions and other organizations and elements in the value chain that is related to smart cities. So I think that when we think about smart cities, we have to think about the entire package, what is needed, what is involved. And also, we are focusing on how we can innovate the urban structure. And when we talk about the urban space or the urban structure, this would mean the space, and at the same time, it also should consider all of the activities of people living there, the city dwellers. And so I think that when we think about innovating the structure, we have to think about innovating the time and space related elements that is tied with smart cities. So now let's go into the discussion in full-fledged. But before we actually begin the discussion, I would like to ask the two panelists on stage, their impressions of the presentations. First, Professor Park So-yeon.
Yes, thank you. As mentioned, at this smart city discussion, unfortunately, we have a technical issue, and that is why we weren't able to hear the case of Barcelona, which is quite unfortunate. But with regard to this smart city and this top agenda symposium, I truly hope that this is not a one-off event. I hope. And I do believe that it's quite a positive that we can engage in these discussions. And the theme of the symposium is urban transformation through smart cities, which is about changing the physical structure of cities. And not only that, we've heard from Paris and Melbourne about the neighborhood cities and the super block of Barcelona, the 20-minute neighborhood of Melbourne, the 15-minute neighborhood of Paris. So you can see that the fact that we have all of these items presented here at the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium in itself deserves an applause. When we do talk about the smart city, there are particular images that would come to mind. And you may think of new mobility, regions with cutting-edge technology, a new land management system. In other words, there are many futuristic or future-oriented examples that do come to mind. But you can see that for us here at this session, we're talking about our neighborhood, the community. And it's not about just new and cutting-edge mobility, but it's about our 2 feet. In other words, it's about making the community, the cities walkable, providing a livable environment, a livable neighborhood. So I believe that this angle of discussion makes the discussions much richer. I believe that the smart city and the solutions that can be offered by the smart city all start from our community and the neighborhood. And I can also say that the essence of the smart city is already up and running in our backyard or in our neighborhoods. However, maybe the policymakers are not aware of that. So the specific examples and cases that we saw today, I think, is a welcome effort. So the 15-minute neighborhood, the 20-minute neighborhood, and in terms of the walkable super block, there are many complex factors that do come into play. So we need to understand that. And we need to make sure to use these factors to innovate the city. There are feasible factors, but there also may be certain areas that may remain abstract and just remain in our discourse. So it's important to identify the two of what's feasible and what is not. So I do want to make sure that we do throw in the right questions to make that identification. And today's symposium, I think, is at a critical fork road. 51% of Korea's population is currently living in the metropolitan area, and our average time of commute is an hour, 2 hour and 30 minutes. So this is the reality here in Korea. But when we think about the 10-minute and the 20-minute city catchphrase or slogan that's pronounced by the city, sometimes seem like just a fairy tale. However, due to COVID-19, we've been seeing the cases of students and those at work not going to the offices or schools, but forced to stay at home. And that also led us to think about our neighborhood, our community, because we have to stay at home much longer than in the past. So in this juncture, I do believe that today's presentations carried on significant meaning. And in addition to that, the ideas that were shared by these individual cities, I think, can be reviewed to see how it can be reflected or grafted into the Korean community. And I think that it's important to structure these ideas to see whether it befits our society. And I do welcome these discussions. And thank you all for the speakers for those inspiring talk. Yes, thank you, Professor Park. Professor Park talked about the 15-minute and the 20-minute neighborhood of, it seems as if it's fictional. And I would have to agree because sometimes it does feel like a fairy tale in Korea. But I do know that there may be some alternatives, so it would be great if the speakers can also share that with us in the future. Next, moving on to Director Yoo In-sang, what was your take?
Yes, I'm Yoo In-sang from LGCNS. And well, I listened to the keynote presentations and the presentation by the panelists. And as it was mentioned, we heard about the 20-minute neighborhood and the 15-minute city. And these concepts are what's mainly discussed during the election time. Mayor election, the general election, presidential election. It doesn't really rings a bell to the general public. Because in Korea, actually, we have the longest commute time probably in the world, or one of the longest commute time. We talked about the compact city, and let me tell you a funny story. Well, today, I am participating not as a policymaker, but as a consumer, a user of urban services. And also, I am participating in the Sejong Smart City Pilot Project. But I'm going to talk about that project from a consumer perspective, a user perspective. So that's my position as I participate in this conference. Now, I think that the greatest purpose of mobility is to actually eradicate transport or movement. We usually talk about transport when we talk about mobility, but actually mobility is to minimize the movement. It is a tool for minimizing movement or transport. But nevertheless, Korea has the longest commute time in the world, and that is because that's how our policies are and our laws are, and that's how our cities were planned. For example, we have different housing districts that are separate from the commercial districts. Of course, there are mixed use areas in some of the new cities. And that is actually, I think, the basic approach for the new cities. But what about the other cities? Do they have multi-purpose or mixed-use development? That is not so. That's not the reality here in Korea. And the presenter talked about, Professor Rose Hansen talked about a long-time commitment. But what about the approach for brownfields? Well, not greenfields. It really takes a long time. And we have talked about many different issues today. Urban common was also mentioned, and common good was mentioned. When we talk about a community-based approach, these concepts come up. But in Korea, I think that these approaches have been mentioned in the past, but I think that other alternative approaches have been implemented in Korea. And also, if I paraphrase the changes in the city, I think that we need a change in the lifestyles. And for that, we need innovation in the daily lives of the people and the innovation of spaces. But how can we actually concretely and substantially achieve this? That is what we have to focus on. I always go to this Barcelona Smart City Expo each year. And this year, the World Smart City Expo celebrates its 5th anniversary. As it was mentioned by Professor Park, I think that compared to 5 years ago, the topic and the theme of the expo is becoming more detailed, more realistic. There are about 200 definitions of smart cities, but now I think that the definitions are becoming more clear for the general public to understand, more detailed, and I do hope that we can really talk about the pragmatic issues that are important for the daily lives of the people. Thank you.
예, 이윤선 상무님 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Yu. Well, because of not so smart infrastructure, I'm not sure if it's because of the not so smart Korean infrastructure or the not so smart infrastructure in another country, but we have not been able to connect. Director Sophie Matila, I had high expectations for his presentation. I really wanted to listen to that presentation because I wanted to hear about the policy aspects. But I think that we can still talk about that. I think that Mr. Yu briefly touched upon it.
So it's about having the super block used for mixed-use purposes and to cater to the patterns of the citizens, the pedestrians, not necessarily having to take the car. So there were some positive effects that can come from the super block. So with regard to the case of Barcelona, it'd be great if we can also talk further about this very topic. But at any rate, let us begin the panel discussions in earnest. We do have some questions for all of our panelists, and I would be grateful if you would respond. And we also have our online participants, and we will be entertaining the questions of our online participants after we hear from the first set of questions. So first, to Professor Carlos Moreno, I have a question for you.
20년도에
Now, in 2016, you first proposed the concept of the Paris 15-minute city. It was the first time that such a concept was raised. So I have two questions for you. First, now, there are cities with many different levels of density. Melbourne has a low level of density, whereas Paris, it has a really high level of density in the city. So, well, large cities, Paris and London, I think that because the cities have different densities, what is the best strategy to apply the 15-minute city concept in large metropolises and many cities with different densities within these cities? And also, you talks about proximity, and you talked about how the changes should arise based on the 4 pillars. You talked about ecology, proximity, social solidarity, and also the citizens' empowerment. That was mentioned during the presentation. I'm really interested in the social solidarity part. So if you can elaborate on that part, that would be very helpful. Well, it's a request rather than a question. So Professor Moreno, if you may. 네.
Element for understanding the double vision and the implementation of the 15-minute city concept. We needed to avoid the gentrification. We need, with the 15-minute city, to rebalance the social functions in cities. For that, this is very important to preserve the common good. The common good is one of the strategic points for giving to 15-minute city this capability for sharing the resources of cities for different category of citizens. Concretely, we have the possibility to create the new economical administrative tools. In the case of the city of Paris, we have a company subsidiary, 100% of the city of Paris, Samaest, and its mission statement is to buy square meters for renting them and to install the local shops, the local commerce with a rent below the speculative real estate market. This is the same way for the social housing. We need to preserve the social housing for installing citizen dwellers in different districts. This is as well the way for promoting the participatory budget. I think that for the 15-minute city, one of the key challenges is to preserve the common good with the services for the general interest, the public space, to reconquer the public space, not for cars, but for people, to open the public space for cultural activities, fostering people with the bike lanes, with the bike sharing. This is the service of the city. and to proposal for supporting a social urban policy for the people with low incomes, low revenues.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno. We have a
일단 뭐 질문에만 답을 해
Yes, so we heard the speaker reply to the question, but in terms of the social solidarity, perhaps if we have an opportunity, we'll be able to go back and listen to his comment. And I have a question for Professor Park.
왜냐면은
My question to you is the following. We talked about the 15-minute city of Paris, as well as the 20-minute neighborhood of Melbourne. We weren't able to go into detail on the super block of Barcelona, but at any rate, the common denominator is that all of the daily needs will be placed in the vicinity, in the proximity of our citizens, whether it be on foot or by riding a bicycle. And I believe that until recently, you were the president of ORI, the Architecture and Urban Research Institute. And I do remember that you presented the national minimum standard for basic living infrastructure, which indicated that whoever you are as a citizen and wherever you live, regardless, there will be universal daily needs or services that would be offered. And I do remember that you've presented the time per capita consumed to reach these individual facilities for the everyday need. So I would like to understand, or would you like to compare your research with the urban transformation that was mentioned throughout the presentations? Whichever country it may be, it is a public obligation to offer the national or the minimum standard for basic living. And I am a bit embarrassed to say this, but I can say that I can probably divide up my career from before working for ARI and after working for ARI. For me, it was a true enlightenment to be exposed to what's really happening on the field. And if we look at urban transformation, the theme of today's topic, the role of the public sector may be key. Policies and public criteria and standards are essential in that aspect. Now I am back in the academia, but I talk about ARI as my organization. I have that attachment with that organization. But what I want to say is there are scholars and those with doctorates at ARI that are doing wonderful work, and they've researched this national minimum standard for basic living infrastructure, and it was December of 2018 when MOLIT published these standards. According to Article 4 of the Special Act on Cities, every 10 years, the country needs to present public facilities of daily need. And this had to do with offering care, medical services, education, as well as leisure services to everyone, all citizens of Korea. So there was a minimum standard that was set forth to make sure that all citizens can enjoy these universal daily need services. And we've been seeing programs springing up out on the field in the local areas. So the 10-minute city and the 20-minute city focuses on the daily services, the living services of the citizens. And this norm was something that was pursued by Korea as well. What we did at ARI was look into the data, especially we looked into the 20 to 20 meter cell walkable distances of more than 260,000, which consisted of 5 people households. So we went through a very complex process to understand the lacking facilities of specific cells or areas. In other words, it was about providing the foundation for the public to do and play its role. And through discussions, we were able to bring about this as a public standard or a national standard. However, for cities with high population density, reaching these services in 10 to 15 minutes was the goal that we wanted to meet. However, there are areas with low fertility rates where we do not have that much of a population, and in that cases, there will be situations where you cannot reach a facility in 10-15 minutes by foot. So what we wanted to do was have these facilities be accessible at least by car within 30 minutes. So these were the recommendations or the standards that were presented by the government based on the research of ARI. So that was 2018. So the fact that we had these official minimum standards for basic living infrastructure, I think carries significant meaning. And I do want to applaud the efforts. But as mentioned, this is the national minimum standard for basic living infrastructure. So we do have this minimum standard. But in addition to that, it's important to make sure that these standards are optimized for the individual local regions. So this is something that we have to work on further. As for the specifics, you can refer to the information on the MOLIT and ARI website by facility. The 15-minute neighborhood, the 20-minute neighborhood, and the national minimum standard for basic living infrastructure that is presented by MOLIT and ARI focuses on the fact that the public sector should be providing these basic services of education as well as medical services. So whether it be a positive or a negative, we can say that this was the case for quite a long period of time. It was in the late 1920s by Perry, the neighborhood unit model, and it indicates that a park or elementary school, for instance, should be accessible within 10 minutes in the neighborhood. So these models were in place for decades. And now it's 2021 here today, and we're talking about the 15-minute city of Paris and the 20-minute neighborhood of Melbourne. We're trying to find a way to really realize this in other parts of the world. And against this backdrop, why do we have to ask this question again? Is the question that I have in my mind. So it's about how well these factors are received in the community. If you look at our SOC or infrastructure projects that is now meeting its third year, all of these food for thought, I think, will provide us with some insights as to what we should do in the future. And the 15-minute city and the 20-minute neighborhood does have a clear vision, and I share that vision, and I know that that is the desirable way forward. But when it comes to provision of facilities, the impact that it has in neighborhood planning, I think, is not as significant as of yet. So the fundamental question at hand, is, as was mentioned by Mr. Yu, is that it's important to first define our lifestyle. In 10-15 minutes, when we want to visit a certain location, what kind of lifestyle do we really want to pursue in the process? And we're trying to take that as the way forward for a smart city. So then, when we do ask that question, we have to first understand what the citizens want, what the residents want, and the plans need to make sure to reflect the feedback of the citizens. But do we have such a process in place? What I can say is that we're seeing this discourse on enhancing the quality of life, but when we talk about the 10, 15, 20-minute city, the N-minute city, who is the major actor in the process of establishing this such a city? For Korea, if we look at the legislature for neighborhood planning, it's not as robust, and this is not a problem confined to Korea. In Australia, the US, and France, I do know that these 20-minute neighborhoods or cities are currently run as a pilot program. And the structure of the neighborhood planning is not as substantial or robust as far as I know. Therefore, community design or neighborhood planning is mentioned via discourse. But if we look at the implementation of these notions and the major actors of these concepts are not as clear. So this is the reality that we are facing. We do have the basic plan for cities and for Seoul. We do have the neighborhood plan, and we also have a district planning tool in place. And what we were trying to do was to innovate these units. In addition to that, we have the neighborhood infrastructure project, the smart green plans. So many programs and projects exist right now, but if you look at the scope and scale, if we compare this with the 15-minute and the 20-minute city or the national minimum standard for basic living infrastructure, we need to never forget the fact that it should be based on the everyday lifestyle of our residents. So, for this to be possible, what kind of questions would be valid? So, this was a comment or food for thought that I wanted to share with the panelists. If we look at our learning curve, we're now moving in our 5th year. So maybe next year or 2 years into the future, we may be seeing some evolution to this discourse or this discussion. Thank you very much.
예, 감사합니다. 박수영 교수님.
Yes, Professor Park. Well, I did ask the question of the national minimum standard for the basic living infrastructure, but you started to talk about that, but then you went into some fundamental values. In other words, about the lifestyles of citizens. And at the end of the day, it's about placemaking. So then, who will be making that place in the first place? And who will be improving the quality of life? I believe that the major protagonists here would be the citizens, including Professor Moreno. We were able to understand the important role that citizens play in the process. So, if I may add to what you've mentioned, we do have urban planning. And so we have the urban planning, the urban master plan, the urban district planning. But the basic act of city planning is basically the master plan, but maybe we have a wrong impression of this master plan. We may think of this as a development plan. In other words, it may seem as if it is a blueprint to build buildings where and so forth. But what we're trying to do is change the angle to these planning methods. So what we tried to do was introduce another leg to this, which is the urban regeneration strategy or plan. So it's about setting the direction for urban regeneration, and it's also about building the right governance and also enabling the citizens to participate. And according to the strategy plan of urban regeneration, it's about setting districts to enhance the vitality of the city, which has led to the revitalization plan, and there was a budget that was set forth. So what I want to say is that we have a sprawling of plans. I know that there's a lot of work at hand, but we need to refine all of these plans, in my view. And what about the smart city basic plan we have in Korea? But you can see that it's quite distanced with the physical planning. So we have the urban planning, and this is another layer of planning. But when we think about smart planning, we should not forget the fact that there's a physical layer. Smart energy, you may think about AMS, a smart grid, and the marketplace. However, the buildings and the space and the place in itself needs to be energy efficient, and only then can we have the smart grid up and running. So we need to understand the place, the structure, and the space as well. But just to say that let's just leave it as is and just to add layers to it, just add platforms and solutions, will not solve the problem. So I want to say that the physical space and the digital space needs to be in balance in order to maximize the impact. So then, the smart city plan, I think that we may have to pivot. It has to connect with urban planning, and we have to move forward to strategic planning. So it's about understanding the vision. So it starts off with defining the vision and understanding the core values, and also about what kind of values exist in other municipalities and how we can align that. So it's about a reiteration of this process, and we have to work in cooperation. And the second point is on governance. How can people participate in the smart city? I know that there may be multiple checkpoints along the way, so we'll have to add that too. And when we do create a smart city, who's going to run this city is another question. So I believe that we need some strategic planning in place. So I just wanted to chime into what you've mentioned, Professor Park, and maybe I've talked for too long. But right now, because we lost one speaker, I try to fill the gap as much as possible. So I do ask for your understanding. Let us now move on to Professor Ross Hansen.
Yes, I would like to ask a question to Professor Rose Hansen. We just heard from Professor Park, and she talked about the national minimum standard for basic living infrastructure in Korea. And here we identify the village unit, which can be reached within 15 minutes on foot, and the region unit, which can be reached within 30 minutes by car. But considering that the vehicle-based mobility has been included in this standard means that the service range of living infrastructure has been expanded. When establishing a supply plan for living infrastructure or life service infrastructure, the population density of an area has to be considered. Melbourne has low population density. So, for example, Melbourne is promoting the 20-minute neighborhood district plan. And this is quite interesting considering that Melbourne has a low population density. So, in an environment with low population density, it seems that special attempts must be made to transform the urban structure into a compact structure. I heard your presentation and you talked about the 3 pilot city projects. But can you explain more in detail about the attempts made by the city of Melbourne to make your urban structure more compact? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It's a really good question. And we knew that when we were looking at a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods, it was going to be a huge challenge, simply because we're such a low-density city and we're a sprawling city, which is challenging in itself in terms of the cost of servicing and looking after people within those areas. One of the things that we have been looking at is let's identify the retail and commercial centres that are well serviced by public transport as the starting point in our journey for creating a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. So in other words, we've got some of the basic ingredients there already on the ground. Let's see whether in fact we can maximise the ability for services and jobs in those locations, including an increase in population density. So we've started to look at some of these key retail and commercial centres as the hubs within which to be able to then pursue urban revitalisation and transformation to create a 20-minute neighbourhood within that context. So it is a slow process. Making it easier and quicker to gain development approvals in those locations is something we've been looking at. Another one is looking at prioritising government-funded infrastructure and placemaking or public realm improvements in those locations. So in other words, really putting an effort both in terms of the monetary side as well as the physical outcomes to ensure that those areas are better places to live and work. So that's what we're starting to do, is to cherry pick some of the locations that we think are good from the outset. They've got some basic ingredients, but we can, through public sector investment and private sector investment, because if we improve the urban amenity of those locations, that will attract the market to invest in those areas and come on board in terms of creating a 20-minute neighbourhood. Can I say that a key to this is medium and higher density residential development in these locations, and that includes social housing and affordable housing. because with the process of gentrification pushing lower income groups out of these locations because of their high amenity offer, it's important that we ensure that it's mandatory that in any residential development in these locations that social housing and affordable housing is included in the mix. Otherwise, we're just going to end up with these locations being affordable for those who've got the money to pay for that amenity and accessibility. So it is a challenge, but we are, by selecting locations that we think have got the chance to develop this concept and maximise the benefits of this concept, we can then start to build on that platform and then spread the ability in other retail and commercial and public transport hubs to do the same.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Rose Hansen. That was very interesting to hear. So, Melbourne 20-minute village case is something that I will continue to keep an eye on because it's fascinating. It's very interesting. Thank you so much for your detailed explanation. So, we heard about the role of a smart city and also transforming the urban space. We also talked about the citizens, their role and their participation, that this is needed. Now, I'm sure that LGCNS has something to talk about in this sense, because you provide the services for the smart cities and the City Hub. So, City Hub, I understand that that is an IoT-based platform. And what kind of role does this platform play for innovating the urban structure? Can you briefly talk about that? Yes, thank you very much. Now, before I go into the City Hub platform, I would like to comment on what was just mentioned by Professor Park and also Professor Rose Hansen, because I have a different perspective in some sense. Now, Korea enjoyed a very high growth within a short period of time, but now we've passed that period, and Korea's growth is slowing. So, but still, we're not in that level of welfare, that stage of welfare that is provided by other advanced countries. So we have this issue of unemployment. From the welfare perspective, we have to think about what we can provide from the public sector. But before that, well, I think that the 15-minute city concept and the 20-minute village is about the public sector providing services, the welfare. But we talk about these concepts, but when it comes to the job creations, for example, I think that we have to actually expand the geographical range and think about how we can provide the jobs or provide the housing. I think that this is the kind of approach that we need. So I also want to talk about university cities. In Korea, there are so many universities, but actually, we don't have enough land or space for housing. So I think that right now the university campuses are not fully utilized. So maybe we can utilize the campuses to deal with the housing issue. And one step back, if I may explain in detail, if we look at the current trends, well, some people say that we need more open data or we need more public spaces. But from a different perspective, I think that first of all, personalization, unfortunately, all services are being personalized. Everyone wants personalized services. And so nobody wants services that everyone else enjoys. They want something personalized. Number two, nobody buys products. They make the products they purchase it as a service. So servitization. And all of this is being done based on data. Personalization and servitization, that's all based on data. So we need an ecosystem for this. I said that I was speaking from a consumer perspective. And so within the city, there are a lot of IoT sensors that are being utilized. And you think that that's enough for the data. But for to change the lifestyle to be data-based, well, we have to think about the finance data, the health data, the communication data, the mobility data, and the urban data. All of these different data have to combine together to provide the servitization of personalized services that are based on data. That is when we can have that true transformation. That is how we can change our lifestyles and innovate our living spaces. Another trend that I would like to mention is that because of the pandemic, large corporations do not need office spaces as much as they had in the past. What does this mean? Right now, we are in stage 4 of quarantine in Korea, so only 50% of our staff members go to the office to work. The rest work at their homes. So what we need is we need smaller office spaces, for example, in Yangjae, for those living near that area, and the rest of the people, they work at home. And then we need another small office space in the Gangbuk area for the people living near there, and we only need limited space. This means that this reduces mobility. This reduces the need for people to commute. I talked about the Sejong pilot project for smart city. Now, because everyone will be probably working at home, increasingly in the future, we are building balconies for all of the new houses that are being developed because people need air. And we talked about master plans. Well, businesses do not like the word directions. Future direction. People don't like that word at companies because this means that there is only a simple, it's not concrete, it's a direction that you may want to take. So business is like something concrete. But actually, when developing cities in Korea, well, the public sector secure the land. And we talk about the lifestyles of the people, but actually the people who are developing the city are the land developers, the private sector, and also the public sector. And when there is not full participation of both sides, then we cannot really bring about changes in lifestyle. So we need participation from both sectors. So IoT, data, cybersecurity, we have to consider all of this when we try to utilize data as we pursue a new lifestyle. The government has to notify us with the global standard, and that's when we can work with the public sector to build a platform, and this platform can be applied to Korea and be exported elsewhere as well. So in order for our smart city platforms to be exported to other countries as well, we need that kind of a global standard provided. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Yu. So I think that he spoke from a private sector or a business perspective. He talked about, well, first of all, job creation. I think that job creation is very important. And when he was speaking about that, I thought about the innovative Earth theory and the innovative territory. For example, Lower Manhattan. Well, there are these innovative regions or sectors, and you can actually walk there. They're located in a walkable distance, and there are these multi-use buildings that are used for offices as well. And people, they work there. There are research centers, there are universities there, and innovation is created there. For example, we can find such a district nearby MIT, and also there is a Cambridge Innovation Center. So these types of innovative regions or innovative centers came to mind as you talked about job creation. Thank you very much for your comment. And in May, in the city of Busan, the 15-minute Busan City project was launched. And also the 21-minute Seoul project, I think, was made as a pledge by one of the Seoul city mayor candidates. So I think that this is something that will be increasingly talked about. Professor Park?
So, Professor Park, the neighborhood, the small neighborhood unit, the community commercial zones and areas were something that you've researched, and I know that you also published a book on the walking neighborhood and the plans for the neighborhood. So, if you consider the context and situation of Korea's cities, what kind of efforts and policies would be necessary by the local governments, and what kind of research do you think would be necessary? Well, with regard to that question, you did mention that just saying that if we just talk about this as a direction, you've mentioned that that's too obscure. But if we do have a goal or an objective, it's something that has to be agreed upon amongst the citizens. We need a consensus. So scholars have talked about how this should be done. And if we look at the case of Paris, and if we listen to the case of Victoria, you can see that the direction of the public and private sector needs to be agreed upon by the citizens as well. So what we can say is that the ideas from the academia may have to go into the realm of politics, and when we do see a consensus forming with the citizens, then we'll be seeing a momentum. So then, what the private sector do and what the academia should do and what the public sector should do is something that we have to think about. And sometimes I was quite baffled when we see when we look into these very short distance cities. But then again, if you look at the contents, whichever minutes we want to where we want to target right now, it's about utilizing expertise to create those cities. And we may be going out for surveys to see how people move around, about their routes, but we can also use the GPS system. But in addition to that, we now have these apps on our smartphones, and we now understand a lot of information about the citizens, and the data is getting more refined than ever. And now this information, this data, needs to be converted into knowledge so that the public and the private sector can utilize this. We've been seeing overseas references of cases, and there are also national standards that are established by institutes like Audi. But what's more important is understanding the needs of the citizens and how they move around. And to understand that, it's about the local governments and the heads of the local governments to coordinate all that. And as the moderator has mentioned, there are all sorts of plans that are emerging. And what is important is to coordinate all these multiple plans, and the local government need to play that coordinating role and to form a consensus amongst the local citizens. So in this process, we need to understand, is there something new that we need, or is it something that we can do with what we already have? So depending on the local culture, it should be about having that push that's necessary by local leadership, or maybe it's about just forming a democratic consensus. But right now we're seeing this fragmentation of the 15-minute, the 20-minute city, and the 21-minute city. But it's at the end of the day about making sure that we have spatial planning that reflects the needs of the citizens. And how will the local governments do that is the question at hand. And this requires the leadership of local governments, and I think that there are also many technologies developed by the private sector that we can utilize. Maybe there are things that are happening out on the field that we may not know here on stage. In the case of the carrot market, for instance, it's an app that's being used by the neighborhoods for secondhand goods. And there are all sorts of different types of programs that are in operation. And I believe that it's important to move on to the next phase. And if we do want to make that next leap forward, we need to understand the roles that should be played by all of the stakeholders. And it's a difficult question to answer, but I know that we all have our own responsibility. It was a very wise question, but this may be just a foolish answer. But what I can say is that maybe at next year's conference, we may be able to draw upon the insights of other references from the academia And I hope that we can see more successful examples that we can talk about in the next year's conference. Yes, thank you. You've mentioned a key point here. It's a very difficult question to answer indeed, and we need further discussions on how to approach this challenge. And in lieu of time, we won't be able to engage in further discussions amongst ourselves, but now it's time to move on. And let me now give the floor to our MC, Ms. Moonsori. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you so much for those robust discussions, and you've been sharing information on the smart city. And I was looking into the comments and the questions that were posed on social media, and we selected a couple of questions, a total of two. And so we have two questions. So first, the question goes to Professor Lee Sang-un. So let me ask that question. It was by Park Wan-ju. So the smart city and the fourth industrial revolution, how can we graph the two? What kind of technologies should be in play is the question for our moderator. Can you please repeat the question? So, smart city and the fourth industrial revolution, how can we realistically or pragmatically graft the two? What kind of technology is necessary in the process? So, I think it means what kind of technology would we need to create or establish the smart city? Yes, I think that, well, I do have some comments to share, but I think, Director, you can add to that. For me, smart city is not about a technological approach, it's about offering the right solutions and services. Of course, Industry 4.0 has some relevance. And what do we see here? This is a group of technology. We have AI, we have drone, we have autonomous driving, and we have IoT. So we have many emergent technologies. But with regard to Industry 4.0, I think that we need to look into this further. There was the first, second, and third industrial revolution. In the 18th and 19th century, we saw the first industrial revolution in Europe. We had the steam engine and the spin wheel, for instance, the spinning machine. And what happened? It was a major revolution. It changed everything from societal values. Of course, from back there was rationalism, a lot of philosophical movements were in place. And a sociologist, a well-known sociologist, also mentioned about this major revolution. So that was the first revolution. And what was the second? May be just a name. We had electricity, and the third was on the internet. And we did benefit from all of these waves or movements. And what about the fourth industrial revolution? I find this quite interesting because it is IT based. What happens? It's about changing all of the standards. Ever since the first industrial revolution, throughout the second and third, there were policy objectives and there were philosophical targets that were in place. It was about increasing productivity or increasing output. And the basic fundamental here was the division of labor. Division of labor has led to enhanced productivity, and with the division of labor, it was about enhancing efficiency as well as effectiveness. But what about Industrial 4.0? Of course, we do want to enhance productivity. However, it's not about the division of labor here. It's about convergence. So convergence is possible with IT. Everything that was siloed in the past is now about coupling that all together. So it's about a technological convergence leading to innovation. So smart city, I think, is at the front line. The smart city is at the front line of this convergence. There are many ways to view the smart city. It could be a process or a platform, depending on how you look at it. But nevertheless, smart city is about a convergent process that leads to innovation. And it's also about changing the living patterns of citizens. So it's an important policy tool. So I may be rambling on right now, but my view of an Industrial 4.0 and smart city is quite different, so I did want to make that clear. And maybe, Mr. Yu, would you like to add?
Yes, if I add on. one thing. Fourth industrial revolution is in becoming intelligent. So making everything intelligent, and all of the technologies are actually the factor technologies. And the person who asked the question might be a student or might be from businesses. But anyhow, the fourth industrial revolution means about opening an era of intelligence. And having said that, what do I have to prepare? Now, I think that a verified technology will be used in this new era. And so you don't really need high-end new technology. Rather, you need to develop services that provides good value for your money. And I think that the market for that kind of service is larger. But UAM, well, people say that this will be used by the general public around 2030. And we are actually working on this to be implemented at the Sejong pilot project city. Now, Toyota is working on a relevant project, and in Korea, actually, there are many different companies of Korea working together to apply the new future technologies in the smart cities of the future. And so, what is most important here is not technology, but actually finance. The financial resources are most important. So I think that technology alone will not be able to develop or bring about all these advances. You need the financing. And also, with that, we will be able to provide smart services to the people so that people can really feel for themselves the advancement of technology and really enjoy the high-end services. Yes, thank you very much. So, smart city is not just about technology alone. He just said that there has to be many different fields and sectors working together to realize the smart city of the future. So they both talked about services, and Ms. Kim Jin-hee asked a question. The Korean cities, well, today we're talking about how we can transform cities, but the Korean cities, in order to transform the urban structure, what kind of smart city policies and support is needed? This is a question directed to Mr. Yu. Well, if you look at the existing cities and also if you look at the existing local municipalities, if you look at them, you'll see that with the authorities given to them alone, we cannot really transform the city structure, like I said before. Well, for example, we're here at Gyeonggi Province, and there is the Gyeonggi Development Company, and then in Seoul, there is a SH Corporation. So there is a separate housing corporation for Gyeonggi-do, and so each local municipality has a separate corporation for development. Now, within this structure, for designing and creating and developing these cities, well, we have to have the local municipalities and the land developers and also the private sector. The private sector financiers have to work together in a seamless manner, because if you develop something but the operation is done by another entity, then the approach might be different compared to when you are in charge of everything. So I think that the method that we used in the past for providing and building cities are no longer effective in the current day and age here in Korea. So I think that we need a change. We have to utilize, of course, the capacity of the public sector and the experience that it has in developing the cities, but also at the same time, the private sector has to jump in. So we need, for example, a PPP, a private-public partnership. So we need a change in the way that we develop cities, because with the existing model, we really cannot come up with innovative city structures. Yes, thank you very much. And a lot of people have been emphasizing the participation of the citizens, the people. And so in the new smart cities that will be developed, it was mentioned that we actually need the participation of the public sector, utilizing its past experience and expertise, plus the participation of the private sector. So everyone has to join together, all of the different stakeholders. So we have Professor Rose Hansen from Australia, and we have a question for you. So let me read the question.
네. 들리시죠? 로즈 한생.
Professor Rose Hansen, can you hear me? Yes, there is a question.
한국의
Yes. Kim Sang-hoon has raised a question for you to answer. Smart cities that are human-centered, that is what we are trying to develop. But having said that, what do you think is the role of future cities as we try to develop smart cities?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think the role of future cities is really about us learning from what we're doing at the moment and how we can actually make cities a better place for people to live. I think we've got centuries upon centuries of information of what not to do in doing city development, but also I think now we're a lot wiser in terms of understanding what works within cities and what doesn't work. And coming back to the citizen, the role of the citizen, I think now we fully acknowledge that the people that we're planning for are the people that need to have a voice. So I think future cities is an exciting time. Certainly information communication technology and the smart city innovations that are occurring are going to make future cities a really interesting and hopefully a more inclusive place for people to live, using digital platforms and a range of technology, enabling people to be better connected in future cities and enabling people to be more participatory and more involved in their neighbourhoods and the way that their cities evolve. So I think future cities have got a rosy future compared to perhaps cities of, say, 100 years ago that were plagued with all sorts of problems. We're now in a situation with our knowledge and innovation to be able to create future cities that are a better place to live and also a better place to work.
네, 고맙습니다.
Yes, thank you very much. So, a place where we can enjoy a better life and a place where we can enjoy greater safety as we continue our lives will be the cities that we will live in the future. I do believe that that will be the innovative cities that we can expect in the future. And thank you very much for your answer. So we do have members in the audience here. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and our staff will hand over a microphone to you. Please speak into the microphone. Is there anyone with a question? We have been talking about city and urban innovation. Do you have any questions related to this topic? I think that the participants seem quite satisfied with what they were able to learn today. So why don't we raise one more question that we received through our online channel? It's directed to Professor Park.
양정수님.
This question was posed by Yang Jong-Un. So when we want to innovate the city through the smart city model, what are the key considerations for municipalities? I do believe that, Director, you did briefly mention this point, but Professor Park, what's your take on this question, please? So what should the municipalities do is the question. I'm not sure whether I'm in the position to provide you with any advice. But Korea, for decades, as Mr. Yu has mentioned, you can see that we've been seeing our cities develop and grow at a rapid pace in Korea. And what's interesting here is that Korea was able to do that because of the central government and the local government. So in other words, it was a centralized development model, and we all do know that we had a very robust centralized model in place where the public sector was at the lead. But now we've been seeing a change in paradigm, and we do know that now we're seeing a participatory process in place with the citizens at the lead. This is the way to go, but we do know that this is the desirable direction. However, if you look at the existing system, the sentiment up till now was the fact that it always should be publicly led, and that's why we see that gap between the two. And the smart city approaches that we're seeing is what's required right now, and we do see that already impacting our everyday life. And relevant to that, we all do understand that there is a different role that the public sector should play. But this compact history of development has made it very difficult for us to implement what we know in our head to actually implement that out on the field. So what I want to say is that innovation in words need to be translated into action. And what kind of efforts would be necessary to do that is what we need to work on. In other words, we all knew that we need urban transformation. And I remember there was the term mindset that was mentioned in the presentation by our professor from Paris. And this, I think, makes me come to think about the change or the innovation of our mindset. This is pertains to everyone, all stakeholders, including academia, research, as well as in public and private sectors. So I want to say that we need this innovation of the mindset. So would that be possible is the question that I would like to pose to the person that asked me the question in the first place. Yes, well, the smart city is about creating together. So you did pose another question, but I think that it's a good food for thought for us to see how we can create such a city. So it was the same case for Barcelona and Paris, and it was about citizens' participation, and the smart city requires the participation of the citizens, and we really need to break away from this process of being too much centered on the public sector. Thank you very much for joining us in the discussions. And I would like to particularly extend my gratitude to Professor Rose Henson from the University of Melbourne. Thank you very much. And a big round of applause, please, for Professor Henson for really joining us till the very end despite the time difference. Thank you so much. And Professor Lee, thank you for moderating the session. And a big round of applause to our panelists as well. Thank you for enlightening us with your insight. Thank you. And I believe that all of your views, your opinions, ideas will be gathered together to create a true and desirable smart city in the future. Thank you very much for joining us till the very end. And the Smart City Top Agenda Symposium now will be brought to a close. However, the 5th World Smart City Expo will continue on till the 10th of September, so please join us both on and offline in the various programs prepared. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.